eyes of the Olmec elite themselves. It was their claimed ability to influence natural forces that had maintained them in positions of privilege and prestige. But in the face of failing crops, even famine, the Olmec elite at La Venta may well have been overthrown.
This idea about La Venta tells us a fundamental truth about civilization. I think that the Olmec allowed themselves to be ruled. It's the people who keep their rulers in place. And if those rulers fail, they can be overthrown. But this wasn't the end of the Olmec civilization. They rebuilt and entered a new phase.
"400 BC to 100 AD marked a period of adaptation for the Olmec. They reverted back to living in smaller, spread-out settlements. And although they stopped creating colossal heads in honor of their elite, the Olmec still produced works of art. They also developed a new way of communicating. I've returned to the Jalapa Museum to see one last truly fascinating Olmec artifact that dates to the final phase of Olmec civilization in the 1st century AD. This is the Mohara Stela. The stone not only features a carving of a remarkable figure in a headdress, it's also covered in hundreds of symbols. Archaeologist Lourdes Budar believes these represent another first for the Olmec.
Estas son las representaciones más incipientes en todo Mesoamérica de escritura con estructura.
Sí, sí, podemos puedes mirar ciertamente que sí tienen números
Sí.
que están grabando, posiblemente nombres que tienen esa línea afuera. Entonces, esto es una crónica de una historia con fechas, con personas.
La forma en la que está presentado el texto y el personaje es completamente nuevo.
Although the leaders aren't being immortalized by colossal heads or depicted as supernatural beings, the Olmec still clearly maintained a ruling elite.
El personaje le han dado un nombre, no es algo como oficial, pero es el señor del cerro de las cosechas. Y entonces va narrando con hechos astronómicos, sucesos astronómicos, y va narrando algunas de las, pues de la historia de este personaje.
Attempt at translating what the symbols actually say has provoked heated debate. But the carvings represent a hugely significant feature of cultural development. The power of the written word as a mechanism of order and as a device for recording a version of history is immense and symbolic. If it's carved in stone, it's permanent, indisputable.
Esta historia es una cosa muy interesante, ¿no? Porque da la idea que ellos están grabando la causa de su poder, la causa de su linaje.
Es eso, ¿no? Es una muestra del poder que ellos podían ejercer.
And perhaps the Olmec were trying to ensure that they weren't forgotten. These Olmec must have known that they were a shadow of what they had once been. But whilst the Olmec civilization faded from history, their influence outlasted them.
When archaeologists discovered the colossal heads, sculptures and carvings in the jungles of the Gulf Coast of Mexico, it was assumed they were Mayan. But over the decades, archaeologists have begun to discover and celebrate the uniqueness of Olmec culture and its antiquity. And this has led to a series of startling discoveries about the nature of the relationship between the Olmec and the Maya.
This is the Maya city of Comalcolco, just inland from the Gulf Coast, and it lies only 50 miles east of the old Olmec center of La Venta. But this settlement was built in 500 AD 1,000 years after La Venta had collapsed. And here the Maya constructed their monumental architecture using clay brick. There are carvings on display depicting shared beliefs. And it has large ceremonial plazas.
Walking through this plaza, I can't help but be reminded of the Olmec site of La Venta. Because this plaza has the same earthen mounds on either side, the same demonstrations of public art, and at the end, this imposing, dominating pyramid.
There are dozens of pyramids in Mexico, built by different Mesoamerican cultures, but the Olmec are credited for building the first.
The cultural innovations of the Olmec didn't disappear with them. They weren't reinvented by the Maya. City planning, the centralization of economic and agricultural resources, the creations of elite power and divine religion, and the affirmation of these through public art and ceremony. These social institutions of the Olmec remained with the people of this region, morphing through time to become ever more sophisticated and complex.
Civilization is a word that archaeologists have used to differentiate between different stages of social development. It certainly doesn't mean that the people who live in civilizations are any more civilized than hunter-gatherer societies, but rather that they have undergone a set of key social transformations. They can produce a food surplus. They have a hierarchical social structure. Cities and an economic system are in place. They express shared beliefs and ideas through art, writing, and ceremonial events. These are all traits that we recognize today, perhaps even take for granted. But here in the Americas, the Olmec developed these traits for the first time over 3,000 years ago.
For too long, the Olmec have lain dormant, and it's only now that the true power of their culture can be fully understood. The Olmec represent a turning point in human development of the Americas, and their legacy of urban planning, sport, public art, complex social relationships have lasted thousands of years.
Leads to a group confrontation.
I'll cut myself off your guys' moves.
No.
I don't want.
So we're not too far from being done. I think probably somebody could move in tomorrow. Put a lot of work into gathering a lot of these materials up and just getting the poles and stuff.